Hold up. My views are my own. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. Lightning round. Dangerously close.
My guest today is Michelle Lee. Michelle is the founder of Clever Carbon. She launched her career in Silicon Valley, where she worked for some of the biggest names in tech, including Salesforce and DocuSign, a proponent for making sustainability the new norm. Michelle founded Clever Carbon to help teach people about carbon footprint in a hip, fun, and relatable way. She is a TEDx and South by Southwest 2022 speaker on the topic of carbon literacy and believes that a carbon literate society is one where transparency and accountability will flourish and one worth striving for. What's up, Michelle?
How's it going, Doug?
So good. And so happy to have you here. Man, so we had talked a couple of days ago, and I feel like there's so many things I want to ask you about, but just right off the jump, just talking about you and the transition you made recently, or semi-recently, and that was working in Silicon Valley, in the corporate world, taking a lot of flights to a lot of cool places, presidents clubs, all that stuff, and then making that transition to Clever Carbon, which you created, and I'm sure it's like very different. And I'm just was just curious, like, what was that experience like? Like, what was your life kind of like before, and how did it change?
Yeah, I mean, life before Clever Carbon and climate work was really, really different. I lived most of my life in the corporate world in San Francisco and in London. And I was on the sales side of technology. And as you kind of move through the ranks, you get exposed to larger companies. And as a result, you need to really build those in-person relationships with customers. So a lot of my job involved going to see customers and meeting them and building relationships and understanding what their challenges are, and being a trusted advisor to them. And it was so much fun because, you get to meet different types of customers. I had a client that we worked with that, made satellites. And then I also had a client that I worked with that, managed lounges at the airport. So you get this like really large range of different business problems, and you have these tools to help them solve them. But yeah, there was a lot of travel. I moved to London as well with one of my companies, and lots of intra-Europe travel there, which was a ton of fun. And we actually use the train a lot, which is great in Europe. One of my realizations is like, wow, you don't always have to fly.
Yeah.
And yeah, presidents clubs were really fun too. Those were
as someone who has never been to a president's club, can you give it a kind of a little rundown? Because people like me don't get invited to president's clubs.
So President's Club is really a way to motivate and recognize salespeople that are top performers. Most software companies have some form of a President's Club. And the one that I was really just, was awesome to be a part of. We, for example, had a 3-night all paid expenses trip to, Four Seasons, and it was in Maui. You get to bring a +1. Your days are mostly sort of planned out with fun things, with some downtime baked in, and, everything's to the 9s and to the 10s. You walk in and you pick what pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses you want, and, you get gifts throughout the session. And I had, I'm a small town girl from Toronto, Doug. Like,
Yeah.
Listen, like Toronto's not that small of a town, but like I had never been exposed to this type of just corporate culture before. It was very interesting for me.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up getting free Ray-Bans, which I mean that's a nice amenity, but I mean I'm sure at that level the people can afford their own Ray-Bans. But the thing about Ray-Bans, this is I used to wear them all the time. I love them. I really like the aviator style,
Yeah.
but they're very expensive, and I break or lose sunglasses
Yeah.
almost immediately. So I
Yeah.
have to like it's spending more than $20 on a pair of sunglasses is out of the question, like in my life.
Well, then you should go to President's Club and just
That's
get
what
a
I'm
free
thinking. I should
pair
go to the
of Ray-Bans, right?
I need to figure out how to get invited to these President's Club so I can keep a nice steady supply of Ray-Bans coming in.
I have a funny story because one of my friends that I took with me to my first President's Club in Maui, that was like maybe 4 years ago. She just went again this year with another friend who also made it to President's Club at the same resort. It's hilarious. She's gotten to go twice because her friends are got in.
So I guess needless to say, that's kind of a tough lifestyle to give up. But you had described it to me as kind of like you'd use the word excess, which I mean obviously like there's a lot of jet fuel involved in that kind of lifestyle that maybe a little bit unnecessary. Kind of when you were just talking a minute ago about trains,
Mhm.
which is sadly we just don't seem to want to build enough trains here in America, or maybe it's I don't know if it's I don't know all the ins and outs, but
Yeah.
like I was just talking yesterday about how much I wish there was a train to Seattle from where I live because I
Mhm.
go frequently and I hate to fly,
Yeah.
and I would love to just have an overnight, just be able to like sleep on the train, get up, eat on the train. It would change my life. But enough about my wish for trains. I was kind of curious, like, was there a kind of like a moment or a period in time where you started to feel like you wanted to move on and do your own thing, or and I guess maybe I don't want to put it in like a silly way, but like an inspiration where you're like, oh, I'm inspired to do clever carbon for whatever reason. Was was that like kind of like a thing in your life, like a time period or a moment?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, the excess, um, President's Club was once a year and there was no guarantee you would make it. So that's like a small snapshot and very uncommon occurrence in my life. I think, for the most part, I was tech worker, just, living in San Francisco, and, I did travel for work, but, had a small studio. And um for me, it's always been about common sense. Like years before I started climate work, it just didn't make sense to me that we use single-use coffee cups. Like, where do these things go?
Yeah, that's
And
insane.
right, if like billions of people are using these every day, maybe even couple of times a day, because you've got your hot coffee in the morning, then you got to go get your cold drink in the afternoon, and it's like
Yeah,
plastic, and like, where does it even go? Like, how do we even have space on this planet to accommodate all this single use stuff that we make? And so, long ago I had already started using like reusable coffee cups and reusable like grocery bags. And for me, it's just common sense. And in 2017, there was like this kind of flurry of content that I had consumed. Everything from Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I listened to this podcast where it was about a guy. It was actually the season 3 of Serial. Everyone knows season 1, right? Adnan Syed, like really incredible just story and what it did in the media. But season 3 is about this guy named John in Alabama, and John was really concerned about climate change. And this was in 2017, and I didn't know anyone who was really concerned. And so like all these different things just led up to this fact that like I don't think that I could in good faith continue consuming animal protein, knowing the scarcity that we have in our resources, right? Like our planet is 30% land, 70% water, 70% oceans. Our population is growing. The middle class is expanding. How can we have the space to, have animal protein for everyone. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And so I went vegan in 2017. And I told you, my friends were pretty upset with me. We're foodies and we like to explore restaurants, but they
Yeah.
got over it. But I think that was really the impetus, is getting to that stage where I wanted to voluntarily become vegan. It's a big change in my lifestyle and, my family culture and everything. And from there, moving to London was also a trigger in a way, because I really opened my eyes when I was in London. They have decongestion zones. You get fined for, driving, or not fined, but you get charged. The public transportation is fantastic in London, and you can also take a train from London to Paris and within 2 hours. And there's so many vegan restaurants, and living in London really helped me just kind of see like the progression of how a city could be more sustainable. And then COVID hit, and I would walk by the park every Monday. Well, I walked to the park every day, and Mondays were particularly bad because Saturday and Sunday, everyone would go to the park. And that means beer bottles, single-use coffee cups, containers, like spilling out of the bin. That's what they call a garbage can in London, in the bin. And I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. And that's sort of what led me to learn about the impact of our actions. That's how I learned about carbon footprint. And that's how Clever Carbon came along.
You had and you made me think of like so many things. I think, like I told you, that I am a tendency to go down tangents, but when you were talking about when you decided to stop eating meat, and then having a bunch of friends that are foodies, it kind of like triggered me this memory that, like, at the time I was like, so I this was several many years ago, like a little over a decade ago. I was working in a fine dining restaurant. I was cooking, and I didn't eat meat. And of course, every chef eats, like, not only do they eat meat, they eat like the grossest kind of meat. Like, kind of like that, like they all worship Anthony Bourdain, and they all want to like eat whatever, some kind of animal that is just is. But I was like, no, I didn't want any of their, I was just eating vegetables. But I remember this one guy that worked there, he's like, you look way too strong to not eat meat, because the people conflate these things. And I was like, well, the difference is, like, while you're sitting there eating like, a slab of flesh, like, I actually like stop and take breaks and do sets of push-ups, and I hit the gym when we leave here. Like, it's the meat's not going to make you strong, man. The gym's going to make you strong. I don't know. I just you just made me think of that memory, and how like frustrating it was, because everyone was like very like really kind of spoke down to me. It was very silly.
I mean, that's like interesting, being a vegetarian chef and like a fine dining restaurant. That's definitely I can see how that would be a little bit challenging. And I do get that a lot. Oh, like people will be like, oh, well, I need my protein. Oh my God. If someone says the word protein to me again, I'm just gonna explode, because like what do horses do? Like, oh, I gotta eat my hard-boiled egg this morning. Like, there is protein in vegetables, and there is protein in a plant-based diet, like, it's okay if you don't want to be vegan or vegetarian, that's fine. But like, protein's not a reason.
There's a quote, I loved it. It was in this documentary. I don't think it was Forks Over Knives, but it was a similar. It was one that had a lot of like athletes in it.
Yes. What the hell? No. Oh,
It's Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of the producers of it, because I think he's veggie now too.
yeah.
It was the guy who, it was the strongest man in the world. He was the guy, like, he won the strongest man in the. He was the guy that could, like, he picked up, like, at some point during the thing, he picked up like 2,000 pounds and like walked across a stage with it. And
Yeah.
he was talking about dealing with his friends, and the same kind of people kind of picking on you and saying, are you gonna eat like that? And he's like, I think he said that someone said, you're strong as an ox. Like, how do you maintain this kind of level of strength and this muscle mass? And he's like, have you ever seen an ox eat meat? Like they don't, they
Right?
graze.
That's another good example. Like elephants, but like, yeah, an ox. I never even thought about that, right? Or
All the
buffalo.
strongest animals, I guess, except for like whales. Whales are
Yeah,
pretty damn strong, then they eat meat, but
yeah, they do. And sharks. But
yeah,
they have a different stomach, right? And to be fair, horses and cows, they have like different types of stomachs as well. But I think in that documentary, they were either that or What the Health, they were talking about how, for carnivores, their intestines are really short and they have a lot of like acid and different types of bacteria in their stomach, and they eat meat. That's what their stomach is for.
yeah,
And for humans, our intestines are very long, more like omnivore animals or whatnot. And I think, this is really my personal perspective, Doug. It's like, someone could tell me that, well, they have to eat meat because of X, Y, and Z, they have health issues and blah, blah, blah. But like, it's the thing, like, I think we have to ask ourselves, like, if 7 billion people or 8 billion people were to do the same, is that okay? And, it's really hard to make those decisions, but, collectively, if we were all to do the same thing, would that be okay? Collectively, if we were to all buy an EV, collectively, if we were all to, I don't know, like buy bamboo cotton from now on, like it's still a lot. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's something that I do want to get into a little bit later on, so I'm not gonna dive in too deep right there. And I wanted to say one more thing while you were discussing, because when you were talking about single-use coffee cups, because you caught me drinking an Arizona iced tea at 8 a.m. this morning, and you're like, seriously. Uh, Although I promise I will recycle this can when I'm done with it. Um, I I wanted to go back into just when you were saying, like the transition phase, going from kind of like the corporate world, kind of jet setting, doing all that stuff. Now you're doing your own thing. But I guess what I was wondering is like what is like where was the genesis of it? Like where did you get this? Where did you get the idea? Like was this all like something that you just kind of like sat down and just brainstormed, or did you work with a group, or um how did it come about?
So I think there were like two things that kicked it off. One was while I was in London, I was volunteering for a local nonprofit that was focused on reducing plastic. And they have, been established in the neighborhood for, a very long time. People knew them. And, when I went to volunteer, I just, I was producing some social media content for them, and I wanted to try new things, and I wanted to try a different tone of voice, because the voice was very like, this is bad, don't do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, that, I don't know, that doesn't resonate. I don't think that resonates with like my friends. Like, instead, if we focus on the positive, like when you do this, like XYZ, and like associate it with a number, then people can understand. Like, if you stop using single-use coffee cups, you're going to save like, 10 pounds of plastic from going to the pound. Like, no one really knows what 10 pounds of plastic are, but once you have the number, if you have a number somewhere else, you can make a comparison. And, I want to use like some fun branding and whatnot. And they didn't want to do that. And I felt very like, just I couldn't let my own creative juices flow. So there was that kind of happening. They do fantastic work, but we just like, I wanted to try something new. And then with COVID and all the single use plastic and paper that was being produced, I was like, how can we do this? How can we continue to do this? And
Oh
so
yeah.
what I wanted to do,
People were like door dashing like every meal, and
yeah, yeah, door dashing. And then on the weekend, like in the summers in London, like no one is indoors. It's such a cultural thing. Like everyone is at the park. And so the park becomes this big hub of garbage when people leave. And like I mentioned, like every Monday I would walk through and all the garbage from the weekend was there. And it was just upsetting seeing the amount of single-use waste. It hurt. It's like, where is this stuff going?
It's going in the ocean. They just dump it directly in the ocean.
I mean, I really hope not, but I have no proof, and I don't know where my municipality's dump was.
Yeah, I can't prove what I just said either, but I'm going to go ahead and assume with the amount of land they have, they don't have the kind of landfills that required for what they produce with like cities the size of London, and
Yeah.
they're on the sea. I'm guessing it goes right in the ocean.
I mean, I don't think that, like, I don't deny that some of it will probably end up in the ocean 100%. But what I was on the look for was, what is a number we can associate with waste? And like, is there a way that this is commonly measured, commonly communicated? And like, I started like just researching. And that's how I learned about carbon footprint. I had been vegan for almost 3 years at that point, and the word carbon footprint had not penetrated my, like, went beyond my subconscious. And when I actually started learning about it, well, there was a couple of things. One, all the websites were really outdated. It was very clear that wasn't meant for like a consumer or general audience. Like, all the websites just like very unattractive. But it wasn't until I saw carbon label that everything made sense. It was like, as an example, you have a single-use coffee cup. Well, the manufacturing of the cup was X amount of grams of CO2. The shipping was X amount of grams. The use is X amount of grams, and the end of life is X amount of grams. And the total carbon footprint is made up of all those different stages. And that really clicked for me. When I saw my first carbon label, I was like, oh my God, this makes sense, because like everything else was like carbon footprints of countries. It was like very vague, and I didn't really understand. But when I saw carbon label, it all made sense to me. I was like slightly mad that I had only learned about it when I really proactively seek to go look for something like this. And that's where I got the idea. I wanted to, on the one hand, use really fun branding. And, if Urban Outfitters were to teach people about carbon footprint, what would that look like? And then B, we need to teach people about carbon footprint because our brain understands numbers. People know what 3.5 versus 6.1 on the Richter scale is. What 65 Fahrenheit versus, 91 Fahrenheit. We know and we understand numbers. Everyone knows single-use coffee cups aren't great and flights aren't great, but when there's no number, there's no magnitude, and you don't internalize that. So, if I'm able to bring this foundational education, which is honestly really simple because it's just a number, then maybe people would make more informed decisions.
Yeah, and this is so interesting you brought this up, because this happened to me the other day. I was at a Planet Fitness. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those, but they
I've seen it,
yeah, they get kind of like people give them a hard time because it's like, it's like the fast food gym, I guess, but like, the fast food of gyms. But I was washing my hands, and then they don't have, like, I turn around and they have like the air dryer machine, and right there on it, like, instead, because it used to be like you had a choice, you could do like paper towels or that, and they got rid of all the paper towel options, and right there on it, it explains why. And it says, this place used to use like some insane number of tons of paper, and they're like, that's 17,000 trees per couple of weeks. That's why this is your only option. And I was like, how easy, thank you for just explaining to people why they have to use the air dryer. I know it's loud and annoying, but then you're drying your hands and you feel good about yourself. You're like, I'm not destroying 17,000 trees right now. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it really does help to add just like that little element of like, here's why we're doing it.
Here's why, and here's a number. I think the number aspect is really important. Like, qualitative information is great, but quantitative information, in addition to qualitative, really brings it home.
Yeah. And I wonder too, if you kind of, with Clever Carbon, because I know you're trying to make it like, hip and accessible, but I think also you want to reach, a young audience and, kids, because that's, I mean, that's who it's really important to be reaching, of course. And there's some things I've kind of learned more recently about kids, just like things where um you're not tricking them, but giving them kind of like options where it's like, I guess what we're talking about is like, the old school version of, you know, recycle, don't pollute, all this stuff. And it's just a lot of negative talk. It's like, don't. And that's it. And there's no, this would be an alternative would be like, for instance, if you cook dinner for your kid, that's what you cooked. You don't have something else. And if they're like, oh, you don't ask them if they want the dinner you made, but you give them options like, do you want this on the blue plate? Do you want this on like the Paw Patrol plate? You can give them all these kinds of these alternative options to make it seem fun. The food is non-negotiable. And I don't know if any of that kind of stuff has been, if you see that as like a useful tool.
Um,
I didn't mean to
in
put you on the spot with like just a random thought in my head.
like when it comes to teaching kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about that. Like, you're giving them options, but it's the plate, it's not the food. That's really interesting. Um, I think with kids, just early on, they learn so much from us, and they actually are really good at being like, wait, this doesn't really make sense. But like, there's so many things that you can do with kids at an early age. Even things like measuring your waste, like in a day, how much garbage did we produce? Like, just make something, like make a game out of it, make it fun, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
weigh your waste, and like help kids like understand these concepts. But then this also requires parents that kind of like believe in this and want to go the extra mile to teach the kids. So, I think we have to look up the chain to schools and to governments and all that. But like, yeah, I think teaching kids at a young age is really important. And, you know, hopefully they'll have a safe and thriving planet to practice these good habits with.
Yeah, and I love your idea for gamifying it. I find
Mhm.
like I find whenever you can gamify anything, you have increased your chances of success just exponentially. Um, but also like speaking of games and speaking of childhood, because my absolute 100% my favorite sport to watch as a kid was basketball. And I was just gonna bring up that um you have a partnership with the NBA, and this is kind of what I was wondering. I'm sure like maybe this ties into your former career, like just kind of working in the corporate structure and knowing the language and just being used to dealing with these kind of people. But when you were working with people that control corporate interests at that level, like the level of like the NBA, it's about as high as it gets, and I know you have other partnerships as well. Um, how do you get them to engage with your ideas?
Well, with the MBA, it started with a corporate workshop for Earth Day. I came in and, I do an hour-long corporate workshop that is meant to help employees learn about carbon footprint in a hip and fun way. And they already had a sense of what Clever Carbon was about, how we use fun and play and hip branding to bring a very boring subject, for the most part, for people who are not like into it, to
Yeah.
life. And the MBA has done a lot of work in the social impact space. So they have an arm of the corporation called MBA Cares. And MBA Cares is specifically focused on social impact, on community projects. And so they've already had this long-standing history of giving back. And I had conversations with people about working with the MBA, and they're like, these people are like, oh yeah, they do a lot of work with the UN, and they're one of the gold standards in terms of like corporations and how they give back. And so, the MBA already had this really strong foundation of environmental and social impact. And so, when I came in and did the workshop, that's how I met them. And, they were working on measuring their own impact. And once, that was done, they were ready to do a little bit more, and they really saw an opportunity to use the platform of the MBA to bring this information to their fans, and to their organization, and maybe even to players as well. And with Clever Carbon, one of our main tools is this carbon footprint quiz that has 5 questions. What country do you live in? How do you commute? What's your diet? How many hours do you fly? What's your home energy? Is it, renewable? Some part of it is renewable. And it's a really quick quiz that helps people find out their carbon footprint. And people can literally do this within a minute on their phone during halftime or during, some sort of break. And so they saw an opportunity with this quiz, and they, the first kind of iteration, they put it on the Jumbotron during the All-Star game this year in February. And then now the NBA has their own version of the quiz. It's branded with their colors and their logos. And at the end of the quiz, you actually get a badge that has your name and your carbon footprint on it. And that badge can be downloaded, it can be shared on social media, and people do that. And so the NBA has their own version, and they put that on on one of the playoff games. I think it was the Lakers versus the Grizzlies, and we did a lot of prep for it. There's like a broadcaster that essentially in the stadium tells people go take your carbon footprint quiz to learn about your impact on the planet. And we came up with that language together. And I was on standby for the game just to make sure everything was going okay. And that was the first time we had worked with such a large organization, like an organization that had such a big reach. And it drove so much traffic when they put it up that our website broke. Our host was like, "You're being attacked," and they just shut our site down. And I was like,
Oh
"Oh
no.
my God.
Oh,
Oh my God."
they thought they were doing that thing that hackers do. I forgot what it's called. It's where they but yeah, I know what you're saying, where
Yeah.
they drive so much traffic at you that it's false traffic.
Yeah.
But that's fantastic. That's amazing that it was actually all driven through the NBA All-Star game.
Yeah.
They televised it, or was it just it was on the Jumbotron? And
I think at some point it was actually on the TV as well. There was a QR code,
oh,
so you could go
cool.
and scan and do the quiz. So not only was it people in the stadium, people at home could do it as well. And it was as a sales engineer and as someone who has worked in tech, and when your software goes down, it's all hands on deck. You have to get that thing back up. You have to make sure you give your clients a full sort of report after what happened and what you're going to do moving forward to prevent that from happening. But when it went down, it was oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening. This is such an incredible opportunity. And I what I will say is that the NBA, the team that I was working with is so kind, is so supportive, and I did my best to provide follow-up and regular updates, and we got it back up the next day. The thing is, it happened over a weekend, and my developer, he was on vacation, and it was just really hard to get a hold of him, and he was really responsive. It was all these things coming together, but we fixed it on the Sunday. But yeah, they were just really kind, and they said to me, they're it's a good problem to have, and that was it.
Yeah, that's such an awesome story. I love that story. And because I think I think a lot of people, when they think about the NBA, and if they think about obviously LeBron James, you think about him and community outreach, and he's kind of a philanthropist. But it's very cool to hear that the people that I'm not trying to disparage by saying the suits, but you know what I mean, the people that are not on the court, that are not the star, the stars on TV, that they are open to your ideas. They're interested. it sounds like, you know, they're open-minded. I mean, did you feel like you kind of like there wasn't much pushback when you were saying like this is what I want to do?
I mean, I think we co-created it together. Um, and a lot of the times it's like I come up with a couple ideas, I bounce them with the team, and they understand how their organization works so they can give feedback on like what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I think you're 100% right. This is the MBA, and they gave this incredible opportunity to Clever Carbon, um, to bring carbon literacy to the masses. Like this is like at the surface, it's, these fans taking a quiz, but deeper and deeper levels, this is really engaging people and giving them their first step into carbon literacy and helping them understand. And carbon literacy happens over time. It's not like you snap your fingers and you're like, oh yeah, you kind of start seeing things through a different lens, and it progresses. So like, I've started this 3 years ago, Clever Carbon, and obviously like have learned a lot, but how I see carbon literacy then and how I see it now is also different. So, helping these thousands of fans get started is really incredible.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. The NBA are friends of the planet. Did you, when you were working with him with that whole thing with this is all after you did South by Southwest, because this would have been this year. I forgot you just said that was All-Star game, so you did South
Yes.
by Southwest last year.
And this year.
Oh, and this year. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, because you're kind of you're in it because you're doing the COP 27, COP 28, South by Southwest. Uh, how was your first South by Southwest? Did you have a good time?
Yeah. I mean, um, you know, maybe another little side story. I used to work at Jawbone. So I don't know if you know Jawbone, Doug.
I'm
They make the
unfamiliar.
Bluetooth,
No.
they make the Bluetooth headsets, and they make these Bluetooth speakers, and it's like it was a super cool company. They had like a health band, and I think celebrities were investors. And I've seen famous artists in our office because we used to partner with a lot of different artists, and they work very closely with Apple, and they're this like super cool and hip brand. Like the design of the product was absolutely beautiful. Like I could go on and on. But yeah, I guess with when I was working at Jawbone, I actually lost my train of thought. What was your original question?
South by Southwest
Yes.
2022.
2020. Okay.
Okay.
So when I was working at Jawbone, because we were like such a hip and cool brand, they would always go to these like really awesome conferences. There's like a tech conference in Vegas, like a gadget conference, and they would always go to South by Southwest. And I never got to go.
Ah.
My friends, they were, whatever their role was, the product managers and whatnot, they got to go. And like it was a week of like fun and parties and showcasing our products. But I worked as a customer care program manager. So I was like, creating content for like how-to guides and customer care. And so like there was no reason for me to be there. So I was like always so envious of my colleagues that were going and having so much fun. So for me, South by Southwest, like I already knew how cool it was
Yeah.
because of all of the meetings that would happen before and the big budget that we would have. And when I applied to speak at South by Southwest, I was like, haha, this is the biggest pie in the sky thing that I would ever do.
Yeah.
Um, I'm, this tiny like startup that literally is just me and just started. But I was like, who knows? Let's go and see. So, for me, being at South by Southwest was like just this incredible like awe moment. I think I appreciate every moment of it because I realized what an opportunity it was. And the first year I went, like 2022, it was just after COVID. So I don't know what South by Southwest was like pre-COVID, but like post-COVID, it was still like very booming, lots going on. You know, you as a speaker, you get a platinum badge. So I got to go see some comedy. One of my favorite bands, Night Moves, was also performing, and you know, seeing the talks and going to like the side events. It was so cool. And also that's where I met Goals House, which is a really interesting organization. Goals House does a lot of side events at various large gatherings. So, for example, at the World Economic Forum, you know, Davos, or at the UN General Assembly, and they have amazing content, and they have like an incredible group of people that come through the house. And I met them at South by Southwest. They invited me to participate, and from there, like, that was one of my really actually incredible takeaways and now I'm still partners with Goals House in many ways. And yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to describe that experience of being at South by Southwest and speaking there.
Now I'm getting jealous. Actually, but you know, I am a little bit jealous of your South by Southwest, yeah, being a presenter and all that stuff. It sounds so fun. But actually, what I am really super jealous of is the fact that you were invited to COP27. For people that don't know, like, that is an extremely difficult summit to be invited to. I guess, like, you know what, really quick, this is something I need to get better about. Can you very quickly just explain to everyone what COP27 is?
Yeah. And, you know, just quick kind of like clarification. I wasn't invited to COP27. I went to COP27 and I was able to participate in the Blue Zone because I was given a pass by a friend. But let me kind of explain to the audience and what COP27 or what COP is to me. So COP is Conference of the Parties, and it's been happening for years. So COP27 was the 27th Conference of Parties, and you hear about, you know, the Paris Agreement. So COP27 was in Egypt, and the Paris Agreement was a COP that was held in Paris. I should probably know which COP number that was. I forget. But like every year, you know, COP is in a different place. And essentially throughout the year, there are negotiations between the countries that are, you know, specifically geared towards, you know, climate and climate legislation. And at the Conference of the Parties, that's where they all come together to talk about any details that remain and decide what the agreement is going to look like. And sometimes they're able to all get on the same page and sign an agreement, but there have been years where there was no agreement because everyone couldn't agree, or maybe the agreement wasn't as strong because some of the things that maybe some of the countries wanted to get in weren't able to get into the agreement. So COP is really like, you know, these negotiations happen year long, but they culminate at this conference where everyone comes together and they're in a negotiation room, and it's like very tense, and people don't sleep, and yeah, there's a lot going on.
There's very, very serious people. I listened to so there's a, I don't know if you ever read any books by Kim Stanley Robinson, but he wrote The Ministry for the Future, which
Oh yes,
which
I've been meaning to read it. I need to read it. Should I read
I
it?
absolutely. To
Okay.
me, it was the most impactful book of 2022 that I read. I
Wow.
read
Okay.
that book, I put it down, and I was like, oh my God. But it's very prophetic, sadly. And there's so much stuff that he put in that book, like the heat waves in India, all that stuff. He was kind of predicting that in that book. And it's, you know, it's scary stuff, but
Mhm,
also, like, it's a lot. I mean, to me, it was actually in many ways a very hopeful book,
mhm,
you know, because he's a utopian. I only bring him up because he got invited to COP 27 as well, I believe.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but in the same thing, he was in a capacity of, just because he has the celebrity of having written that book,
Yeah.
that they wanted him there because they're like, oh well, this, you know, because that book changed so many people's views. I think Obama put it on his list of like must read books when it came
Mm,
out. But from his point, so I always think of him as like such an influential person regarding climate change and how serious he is about it and what a fantastic author he is. So I just think of him as like, oh, he's going to go there and tell them, what to do, because he's Kim Stanley Robinson. He's one of my absolute favorite science fiction authors. I've read a lot more than just that book by him. But I listened to an interview with him, and he was saying he got there and it was very like kind of shocking, like how very not seriously anyone took him, because he's not a scientist, he's a novelist. And so he was kind of very much an observer. And I was like, oh, okay. These COP events these are people are not joking around. These are the real negotiations. This is what like really happens. And a lot of it happens behind closed doors. Like you were saying, you had to get a blue pass, which is accessible only through the United Nations. And that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. It's like, you got the blue pass, you got to go inside where no one gets to go practically. Can you just kind of like describe maybe what that experience was like a little bit, and if there were any like highlights or any kind of ideas or negotiations that you thought really stood out to you?
Yeah, so with COP, there is this blue zone where only organizations with observer status are able to access. And essentially, this was my first COP. I think most are similar, but it's like this really large convention hall, and countries, they all are, they have, I don't know if observer pass is the right word, but they all have like passes, and they all have access, and they have these booths. Most UN countries like have a booth within this large conference hall, and there's usually a space where like someone can sit down and have a meeting. And a lot of times these like booths also have space for kind of like a talk, right? There's a little stage, there's some chairs, there's like cameras. And throughout the entire 2 weeks of COP, there's continuous programming. So they invite people to speak, and you can go to that country's booth and kind of see what their schedule is. And then there's also other observer organizations that can set up their booth there. Earthday.org, for example, was one that stood out to me when I went, and every day they would have like different talks. And it's really like a convention in many ways, where the negotiations happen. You actually have to have an extra special status to have any access to that, which I did not have. And for me, I had Blue Zone access during the second week. So, during the first week, I was mostly participating in the external events, like, Bloomberg had a sided event there. Goals House had a sided event there. The Economist and New York Times and all these other organizations have side events. So there's also the Green Zone, which is where people who don't have Blue Zone access can also go and see talks and different things. So like there's a lot of programming going on at COP, and you don't necessarily have to have a Blue Zone pass to get a lot out of it.
Oh yeah. It is just like you said, though. It sounds like if you show up and you don't have the blue zone access, it's like a convention, which also, I mean, you can learn a lot. You can see innovative ideas, meet interesting people. But it does sound like, when you got the blue zone access, you're in there where the most powerful world leaders are potentially, signing agreements, signing treaties, making potential like change that will affect us all. So that's very, very cool. I don't know, were you like a little bit tense when you like stepped over the threshold into the blue zone, or is that kind of silly?
I mean, I was definitely really excited, and like even just like going to get your badge is a whole ordeal. Like the lines are quite long, and like, am I gonna get my badge? Like, do they have my information? But once you step in, it's like the UN has this really interesting, I don't think it's like intentional branding, but it's like you've got this stage and you've got these mics and like you've got this UN banner at the back, and like seeing that in real life and seeing press conferences happening. And I got to participate in a press conference because of my friends at Peace Boat and Blue Planet Alliance. They invited me to participate in a press conference, and it was videotaped, and it's actually live on the UN website still. And I got to speak about women in climate, which is another project that I oversee. It's a nonprofit that's aimed to create a joyful and safe space. And I think actually, women in climate was really impactful in a way, or I can see women in climate really having an impact because there were a lot of men speaking at various talks that I went to.
Yeah.
And, but when I looked around, I saw a lot of women. So why weren't they on stage? Why weren't they speaking? And so with Women in Climate, one of the really cool projects that came out of COP27 was our speaker database. And basically, I sent this out to my network of women climate professionals, and anyone can create a free profile, and you can indicate your level of experience, your areas of expertise. Are you available to speak in person or remote, and your bios and all your links to social media? And the idea is to have this resource for event organizers to recruit speakers from. If you need more diversity on your panels, which is really important, diversity in thought, like let's not have an echo chamber on a panel. I think it's really powerful, and the speaker database has really, really grown. And it's like this grassroots movement of women who want to uplift each other, who are in the database and sharing that they're in the database and sharing that there are other women. And for COP28, I really, really hope to utilize this resource and get more women on the stage. And so I'm really excited about this project and about, the impact that we can make at COP28.
And that's important on so many levels. And I have a personal belief, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm not just claiming facts, but I personally believe that if the more world leaders that we have that are women, and as time goes by, as more and more women are in leadership roles, president roles, and so on and so forth of more countries, I think that it would really expedite the the work that really needs to be done for carbon reduction, climate change in general. All these things need to be done. I just kind of feel like this is something that would be a lot of times having too many men in the room, I think it's trying to find a way to put this, detrimental to getting things done.
Interesting choice of word, Doug.
I think some people might agree with me and some people might not, but you know what, this is, I can say whatever I want. It's my podcast.
It's your podcast. Your views are your own.
I know. Anyway, moving on past the fact that I think that we need, a lot more women leaders at the COP events in positions of power, the actual positions of change, and coming to actual agreements instead of a bunch of dudes sitting around being like, well, I don't want to lose 2% profit on my fucking oil farm. If you don't mind, I want to talk about COP28, which you will be attending as well this year. That's in Dubai, I believe.
It is, yes.
Very exciting. I'm also, once again, so jealous of you. Obviously, that would be enormously world changing if the UAE is serious about a course correction, regarding carbon emissions. They've got a really great PR team. I know that they've kind of put themselves out there as like, we're the first. I think maybe they're trying to say they're the first in the region to take it seriously. So I don't know, something like that. But and I'm not criticizing the UAE. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm just saying, if they're serious that they want to make massive changes, they are the people that really can make a massive dent in what's happening. do you have any expectations for COP28? Yeah, and of course you had already brought up women in women in climate, but you know, for you personally, or even for the event as a whole, like anything that you kind of like that you see might be coming out of this next COP28?
This is going to be a very key COP for so many reasons. We are getting closer to irreversible change. So, you know, the clock is ticking. I also think that the region is going to play a really important role in our future. And personally, I think it's great that COP is happening in Dubai, in the UAE, because they have the resources, they have the thought leadership that can create change. And having, you know, world leaders and people who are passionate about climate change convene there, I think things that we can't even imagine or even think of will happen. And I can see this being a very positive outcome. And so I'm bringing this intention and this energy of this being a really critical COP, and one where we can get a lot done, and one where we can bring more partners along with us in, you know, this fight against climate change. So yeah, we've got a lot of work done ahead of COP28, but I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and absolutely, and like I was saying earlier, and I don't want to just single out the United Arab Emirates. I think that it's simple. I mean, all petrostates need to get on board, and that includes the United States, and I mean, you know, a number of other countries. So yeah, very exciting, very cool, kind of like almost, you know, almost bizarre, being like, oh, okay, we're gonna go do this like in a place that's known for oil production. So that's kind of like, but yeah, I think you had said this to me previously before we had done this interview, that you think that's, you know, that's a big step forward.
It is a big step forward. And, you know, there are technologies that will lower emissions. And I think, you know, just focusing on how can we reduce our impact is key. And there's so many ways to do that. Some people think it's the energy transition, you know, transitioning to solar, wind, and in some cases nuclear. Those that requires a lot of infrastructure that we don't have today, and requires a lot of raw materials. And so right now, what I'm reading about is the energy transition. I want to get a better understanding of like, what is it going to take for us to transition to renewable energy? It would be about our third energy transition. So at first it was going, you know, using wood for energy and burning wood. Then it was burning coal. And now, you know, using fossil fuels and all those things. And now we're at the brink of this new energy transition. But like, you know, in our future world, does it make sense for us to go like 90% renewable and 10% you know, fossil fuels? Or like, does it make more sense for us to be like 60% renewable and 40%? Like, and the answer is like, I don't know. But I also don't want to just listen to X, Y, and Z say, like, we need to do this energy transition, because I see all these minerals that are required, and these are extracted from our earth, and they, you know, damage natural habitats. And so it's this really like difficult, like push and pull of, you know, do we make what we have currently more efficient and we just try to reduce our impact in addition to all these things? And what is the mix? Like, what is the optimal mix of like not damaging our planet, but being able to rely on a form of renewable energy? It's very like, I really enjoy reading about it and trying to formulate this opinion. And I'm still in the process. And I don't think there's ever going to be at a place where I'm like, yeah, this is the answer. But you know, trying to get there and not, and like being educated on the topic, I think is really important as someone who works in climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, here's the thing though. I have to ask you a question. I believe that it's going to be the most controversial question that I'm going to ask you of the day. Weirdly so, because I think 20 years ago, it would not have been thought of as controversial at all. But people like have changed, the climate, the climate of this discussion has changed so much. And that's, that there are a lot of loud voices out there that are saying personal individual carbon reduction is pointless. And as long as major corporations continue to pollute and remain poorly regulated, uh, and obviously there's some cynicism there, or a little bit of maybe just like fatalism. But it's not about what I believe. I want to know, what are your views on that? What are your views on people saying like, why should I even recycle anything if the U.S. Navy is going to continue to or not even, just Carnival cruise ships are going to be out dumping in the ocean. um Sorry, I'm kind of rambling. What are your views on the personal carbon reduction?
I mean, it's hard not to, feel defeated when, the at the very top, like the legislation is not necessarily there. Like I acknowledge that, but I also think that we live in a capitalist society. And as a result, consumers have so much power. You know, we can review products, we can give feedback to customer care, and brands and companies understand this, and they want to give consumers what consumers want. And you walk into a Sephora today, you've got all these green check marks all over the place,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
It's like certified clean beauty, and you know um, fast fashion companies are coming out with like recycled polyester and different ways to show their consumers that they're being more sustainable. So I absolutely think individuals make such a big difference. And the more people speak up, like every time I go to a restaurant or I go to a hotel, I try to leave a review that has a component about sustainability. Like, I really like that this hotel uses, doesn't have just like single use toiletries. And, I appreciate that, when I leave the room, the electricity is turned off. Like, I leave those things in reviews, and where I
yeah.
see gaps, I leave that as well. And, whether or not that actually makes a difference, like, I don't know, but I definitely now when I go to hotels, like there's like a hotel that on the mirror was like, X, Y, and Z to help reduce your carbon footprint, like on the mirror of a hotel. Most people don't know what carbon footprint is, but like,
Yeah.
there was this sticker. So I absolutely think individual action is important. And I hope that, more people won't get bogged down by what's happening at, the top levels. But what makes sense to you as an individual? Like, um is it the single use coffee cups, or can you use a reusable coffee cup? What feels good for you, what feels right for you? If you don't want to make habit like changes to your habits, like what else as an individual can you do? Can you write your local government, or everything else? Like there's more that an individual can do than just like go vegan or go plant-based. You can use your voice in many different ways. So maybe you do all of them, maybe you do some of them, but I think if everyone can do something, it's very impactful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, you made me think. um I need to be kind of careful how I word this, because this podcast was briefly sponsored by a company, um, and I had a promo code, and I would do like little ads on here. Didn't like that. Our relationship did not last very long, but people this literally said to me, they were like, "Hey man, this seems like a cool product. It's kind of a health product type thing." They're like, "I don't want to buy all these plastic bottles." People really do care about that, and bothered to tell me that's what, they're like, "I'd love to support you and I'd love to use your promo code and keep you, sponsored by this company, but I don't want to buy like a lot of people these days just don't want to buy a ton of plastic that they're just going to throw in the trash. And I was like, I totally respect that. And also, I mean, yeah, it's tough because yeah, it's true. When you look at what Exxon is going to do, what their emissions are going to be and what they're going to be doing to the planet in a year versus what you're going to be doing, it seems absurd. But what I think about, it's kind of like when you brought up being in London and seeing all the trash in the summer.
Mhm.
I think about, I drink a lot of water, and I think about what 100 water bottles looks like. It looks like a shitload of water bottles. It looks like an entire trash bin full of water bottles. So I have a canteen. It's made out of steel, and I just refill it.
Mhm.
And to me, it just makes more sense than. Also, it makes more sense.
Common sense,
It
right?
makes more sense than buying water too. I mean, I know it's cheap, but it's still dumb to when I can literally just refill it out of the sink. So I mean, that's just my personal. All I'm trying to say is that I agree with you, and I've I've witnessed firsthand, yeah, the power of the consumer. Michelle, I got to tell you something. We are getting dangerously close to the lightning round. The lightning round is
Uh-oh.
the part of the podcast where I ask you a bunch of questions super fast. Don't take any time to think, and it's kind of like the game or the part of the podcast. I did not write the lightning round. In fact, I almost never write them anymore. This was written by co-producer Colleen, and I have not even looked at it yet. It's on this notebook right here, so I'm about to look at it for the very first time and tell
Oh
you
gosh.
they're always different. There's no telling what you're gonna get. Sometimes they're very hard. Oh, this one's gonna be. I think you lucked out. These are one of the easiest kinds. You got a Mad Lib. So I'll be saying things to you like noun, verb, adjective, and we will build a little bit of a story. I have a feeling it's gonna have something to do with carbon emissions. Okay, the name of. Oh, sorry, I didn't ask. Are you ready to play?
Yeah.
Okay. The name of this is Avatar: The Way of Water 2. This time it's personal. A Mad Lib story by co-producer Colleen and co-written by Michelle Lee. Um, let's get started. Masculine or gender neutral name?
Robin.
Damn, you nailed that. Uh, color,
Yellow.
noun.
Oh my goodness. Wait, I'm not even getting this. A noun that is masculine or gender
Oh
neutral?
no, this is absolutely any noun that comes to mind. Does not matter.
Oh my goodness.
It's a Mad Lib.
I don't think I've done a Mad Lib before.
You've never
This,
done a Mad Lib?
no,
I am so pleased to be the first person to do a Mad Lib with you. Oh,
I'm sorry.
we're creating a work of art. Just name any
Yeah,
noun. You can say shoe, car, hat,
cat.
cat. Okay. Adjective.
Recycling. Oh, wait, is that an adjective?
Oh wait, no, that
That's
is
a
a
verb.
verb. Uh,
Um,
recyclable,
yeah. Circular.
circular. Okay. Circular. Color.
Blue.
Body part plural.
Hands.
And other body part plural. Can't be hands, has to be something else.
Eyes.
Animal plural.
Elephants.
One of my favorites, if not my favorite. Noun plural.
Puppies.
Puppies. This is gonna be I can tell this is gonna be a great story. And noun plural.
Another noun plural.
Yeah.
Babies.
Okay. Number.
7.
Okay, this is the same name as before. That means that's Robin. Activity.
Composting.
Fantastic. Okay. We are almost done. I promise we're getting so close to the end. I think.
Wait, so is this at the story? Like at the end, there's like a story of everything.
At the end, we're gonna find out what story you've written. Adverb.
Adverb. You're gonna have to help me here. Is quickly an adverb?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll go quickly.
Yeah.
Country.
Canada.
Canada. I love when we get bad lips. This is Robin again. Robin's going on an adventure. Ooh, weapon, plural.
Weapon. Nunchucks.
One of my favorite, although I've hurt myself with them before. They're actually really hard to play with. Ooh, time to shine. Cool catchphrase.
What gets measured gets changed.
You write that down. What gets measured gets changed. Weapon plural.
Grenades,
Grenades. Noun plural.
butterflies,
Yeah, this is Robin again. And plant plural.
monsteras.
What is that?
Monstera.
Monsteras, like the word monster?
It's like a type of plant.
Okay. Monsteras. I've never heard of it. I'm going to Google it after this. And plural noun.
Let's go with shoes.
Shoes. Okay.
I'm so nervous how this is going to turn out.
We have completed the Mad Lib, and let's find out what happens in Avatar: The Way of Water 2. This time it's personal. A Mad Lib story by co-producer Colleen, co-written by Michelle Lee. Once upon a time, there was an Avatar person named Robin who lived on a planet Yellow Cat. On this planet, the Avatar people were circular and had blue hands and eyes, like elephants. They were there because a while ago, humans came in search of the planet's natural resources of puppies and babies, and they did some science experiments that made the Avatar people. After 7 years of peace, one day, Robin's daily composting, sorry, my handwriting is really bad, was disturbed when the planet was quickly invaded by armed forces from Canada. Not one to turn down a fight, Robin sprung into action, grabbed his nunchucks, alerted the other Avatar people, and said, "What gets measured gets changed." With a little luck and a lot of grenades and butterflies and the power of friendship and belief in oneself, Robin was able to defeat the invaders and save his planet's monsteras and shoes until the end of time. The end.
That was awesome.
Thank you so
That was
much, Michelle, for being a good sport. And I only have one question last for you. But it's the most important question of the day. Where can people find you, follow you, Clever Carbon, everything?
Yeah. So Clever Carbon is on most of the social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is my main social media channel, just for everyone. And then Twitter. And then I would love if everyone went and took our 2-minute carbon footprint quiz to find out what your carbon footprint is. Mine is 22.1 tons annually. Average in the US is 17.5. Average globally is 6.3. You can find the quiz on our website, clevercarbon.io.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I can't wait to do the quiz, and I'm going to see if I can beat you. I'm sure I can't. Actually, I don't know. I'm a minimalist. I might not actually produce that much.
Yeah.
I try to ride a bike when I can to get to where I need to go. So we'll see.
That's really good. Yeah.
So guys, you heard it here first. Go check it out. Take the quiz. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. Just great talking to you.
That was fun, Doug. Thank you for having me.